Today, we are diving deep into the life and incredible death of one of the 20th century's most defining figures, Benito Mussolini, the man who literally invented fascism.
But you know, to really understand this story, we're actually going to start at the very end. The scene is a public square in Milan. It's April 29th, 1945. The war in Europe is just days from being over.
And what you're seeing here, well, it's the final, brutal judgment of the Italian people. After more than 20 years of dictatorship, after a disastrous war, this is how it ends for the man they called Il Duce. His body and the bodies of his inner circle put on public display. And that crowd, they weren't just watching, they were participating, unleashing years of pent-up fury.
It is a shocking, unbelievable image, and it just begs the question, how? How did the man who held Italy in an iron grip for 2 decades, the man who was an inspiration for Adolf Hitler, how did he end up here? To answer that, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning.
So, let's rewind. To figure this out, we have to look at where he came from, because the seeds of the dictator he would become, well, they were planted long before he ever dreamed of taking power.
Imagine growing up in this house. His father was a blacksmith, but also a radical socialist who deeply resented the establishment. So from day one, Mussolini is surrounded by these revolutionary ideas. He was a smart kid, no doubt, but he was also a volatile bully. He actually got expelled from the school for stabbing another student. He followed in his dad's footsteps at first, becoming this fiery socialist journalist. But that rebellious streak was always there, leading him to even flee the country just to dodge military service.
And then came World War I. This is the moment where everything flips. At first, being a good socialist, he was totally against the war. But then something clicked. He started to see the conflict as a massive opportunity, maybe even a chance to spark a revolution that could totally remake Italy. Well, that view got him kicked right out of the Socialist Party. So what does he do? He starts his own newspaper and begins to preach a brand new ideology, one that threw out class struggle and replaced it with intense, hardcore nationalism.
And this huge ideological shift, it didn't just stay on the pages of his newspaper. Oh no, it gave birth to a powerful, violent, and brand new political movement that was about to change Italy forever.
He called his new creation fascism. The name itself comes from the Italian word for a bundle, fasci, and its symbol, the fasces, was a direct callback to the power of ancient Rome. You see, it's an axe bundled together with rods, and it's all about symbolizing that collective power, that the state is stronger than any individual. The ideology was simple, and it was brutal. Italy's glory above everything else. One party in absolute control. And the core belief that violence wasn't just an option, it was a necessary political tool.
So how do you enforce that will? You create the black shirts. These were basically his street gangs, paramilitary squads made up of angry, disillusioned war veterans. And they didn't debate political opponents. They terrorized them. Their tactics were designed for maximum fear and humiliation, beating people with clubs, forcing them to drink huge amounts of castor oil in public. And if that didn't work, it was just straight up murder. Now this is the really wild part. His path to power wasn't a real revolution. It was one of the most audacious political bluffs in history. In 1922, he stages this March on Rome. But get this, while his black shirts are marching towards the capital, he's hundreds of miles away in Milan, just waiting by the phone. He was creating the illusion of a violent takeover, and the bluff worked perfectly. The king, terrified of a civil war, just caved. He handed Mussolini the job of prime minister, and within just 3 years, after murdering his key opponents and banning all other parties, he threw away democracy and declared himself Il Duce, the leader.
So, with Italy completely under his thumb, Mussolini sets out to build his new Roman Empire. But this wasn't just about conquering land. It was about conquering minds, building a grand performance of power, all centered on him.
This phrase pretty much became the mantra of the whole regime. The leader is always right. Think about that. It perfectly captures the cult of personality he built, where he was this infallible, almost godlike figure at the center of everything.
And propaganda was key. He got himself portrayed as this athletic, macho Superman, always getting photographed shirtless, harvesting grain or something. He hyped up big public works projects, which created that myth that he made the trains run on time. And for a while, a lot of people, even world leaders like Churchill and FDR, kind of bought it. They praised him for bringing stability. But behind all that posturing was the cold, hard reality of the OVRA, his secret police who were there to crush anyone who stepped out of line.
And if you really want to see the reality behind the propaganda, just look at what he did in Libya.
While he was posing for cameras at home, his regime was forcing people on death marches into concentration camps. The estimated death toll is staggering, over 100,000 people.
And that brutality was on full display again in 1935. He wanted to build his new Roman Empire and get revenge for an old colonial defeat, so he invaded Ethiopia. His forces completely ignored international law, dropping mustard gas from planes on soldiers and civilians. The world condemned it, but in the end, nobody did a thing to stop him.
All this aggression basically got Italy shunned by Britain and France. And that pushed Mussolini right into the arms of the one leader in Europe who really truly admired his style, Adolf Hitler. It's really fascinating to watch how this relationship just completely flips on its head. When they first meet, Mussolini is the big shot, the original fascist. He privately calls Hitler a silly little clown. But just a few years later, he visits Germany, and he is absolutely blown away by the Nazi war machine. He gets it. The power dynamic has totally shifted. The student had become the master, and the man Hitler once looked up to was now his junior partner, all sealed by the Pact of Steel.
And this alliance came at a huge cost. During the Spanish Civil War, Italian troops got embarrassed on the battlefield, which showed everyone that Mussolini's military might was mostly for show. And even more shamefully, to get cozier with Hitler, he brought in Nazi-style racial laws in 1938, officially beginning the persecution of Italy's Jewish citizens.
So in 1940, Mussolini sees Hitler's armies just steamrolling across France, and he makes his fatal gamble. He's convinced the war is already won, and he thinks he can just jump in at the last minute and grab some spoils. It was a move of pure opportunism and arrogance, but his country, his military, they were disastrously unprepared for a real modern war.
And that decision to enter the war, it was an absolute catastrophe. It led to one humiliating defeat after another and exposed the entire fascist regime as a hollow shell, kicking off a swift and inevitable downfall.
Just look how fast it all unraveled. It is stunning. In July 1943, the Allies land in Sicily. Just a few weeks later, his own fascist council turns on him and votes him out. The same king who gave him power now has him arrested. Italy surrenders. It seems like it's all over, but Hitler's not quite done with him yet.
In this spectacular raid, German commandos rescue Mussolini from his prison, but this wasn't a return to glory. It was the ultimate humiliation. Hitler props him up as the puppet leader of a Nazi-controlled state in northern Italy. He had absolutely no real power. He was, in his own words, a walking corpse, a ghost haunting the ruins of his own failed dream. And that brings us full circle. As Allied forces are closing in from all sides, Mussolini tries to escape, disguised in a German soldier's coat, but he's recognized by Italian partisans and captured. The very next day, he and his mistress are executed by a firing squad. And then, their bodies are taken to Milan, back to that gas station in Piazzale Loreto, where the Italian people deliver their own final verdict. The story of Mussolini is really a terrifying look at how a cocktail of nationalism, propaganda, and brute force can launch a charismatic bully to absolute power. But it leaves us with this huge question. Was he just a one-off, a weird product of his time and place? Or did he accidentally create a dark blueprint for a certain kind of tyranny? A playbook that we might still see being used in the world today.